Yeah, I would now start with my first application. So we do all three of us are doing a short input on like roughly 10 minutes about what we are doing, where we are coming from. And I think, yeah, as I said before, I'm really looking forward to learn more from you two guys who are seeing right now on the screen. I'm really interested about your perspectives. What I'm now going to present is like a little bit more focus on our region here in Schleswig-Holstein, what we're trying to do and how we are trying to change education a little bit. So, and I would jump into my presentation and a little bit about like the background of Open Campus. So yeah, we're struggling a lot about like a short tagline for our organization. So it's kind of your update for the educational landscape. Our initiatives, just a rough overview on it. We have a big education program. We do a lot in the startup segment. We have this big Waterkant festival currently, which is another setup. Usually, you know, like we expect like 1,000 people like here from Thursday to Saturday. Now it's a little bit different, but we have a lot of people like in the ether. Can you say that, Tim, in English? In the ether, perfect. Tim is in the background, can still support me like with my, if I fail in English. We're doing education programs in schools, which was really interesting, like also the connection between startups and schools. We have a job platform, we have a Fab Lab here in Kiel, and we have the initiative Kiel AI, and also we now have like a little shop like called Cosmos here in the Kiel-Holstenstraße, where we try to support like local producers in order to sell them directly in the city center. And so actually we're founded in 2009. So I just highlighted here the most important aspects, like founded in 2009, and we're professionalized in 2013. And what's important for the following steps is the coding initiative we started in 2018, because there we made actually our first experiences in online learning. And here just perhaps some atmosphere pictures, so just get a feeling. This is Waterkant, like I think, well, 2 years ago, I don't know, Tim, 1 year ago, you can't see it right now, but I guess 1 year ago. Also some impressions from Waterkant, some technology stuff, and this is our shop at the Holstenstraße here in Kiel, in the city center. We have a quite interesting team, like a lot of different people from different contexts. Some studied, some didn't study, but we all studied different things, which makes the team quite awesome. And we have people who started their own business and came back to to teaching somehow. And we are all quite enthusiastic about sharing our knowledge and try to inspire and motivate others to learn new things and start new things and change their careers. To have like more passion in their job. And what was always important for us is like that we have kind of a combination between organizing events, having programs for learning, creating communities, but also have space for people to meet, physical space for people to meet. And our education program started actually, the roots of our education program started in 2012. The guy in the long hair, which you can see like, in the middle of the picture is actually Freddy, for the guys who knows a little bit closer, with long hair, who is now like, he's working in an organization since I think 6 years. And that was the first part where we did, or had the possibility to offer ECTS for our programs. Students had the possibility to work for nonprofit organizations and get ECTS for that. So they did projects for nonprofit organization, for example, like this one, like for children's library here in Kiel. And it was quite funny yesterday when I was like finally preparing this presentation. I found the screenshot of Kiki, or I found the website Kikiboo, which was created in 2012, still running, which is quite interesting. And also, and nowadays, employee Matthias Nant was one of the students in former times who created this website. And as I said before, it was like the first time we could get, for this service learning program, we had the possibility to give ECTS for students, and in cooperation with the University of Kiel. And our initial approach, we started actually in 2013, like with the Brandt Open Campus and the idea of combining like different focuses, like focusing on practical orientation, like on startups, corporates, and also on society, and that in cooperation with the 3 main universities here in Kiel, like with the Fachhochschule Kiel, with the University, with the Christian-Albrechts-Universität, and with the Muthesius Kunsthochschule. and the possibility that students, it doesn't matter where they study, that they have the possibility to get ECTS for their learnings and in a different approach. And this was really the roots, I think, for nowadays Open Campus. For example, if you look at this program here, it's from this year, but it's like actually the same idea we had in former times, because the idea was that it's not the one person, for example, for a specific topic who's kind of the owner of all knowledge in it, but we invite like 10 experts from the region who have the best knowledge, for example, in project management, and share their knowledge. For example, like these two guys from the cinema studio who like helped us with the podcast, and we also interviewed them with students, like what were their experience, how did they started their business, and how do they keep that running? And the other approach is more like that we have certain experts in the region, also students, who have specific knowledge, which is like where they have really a good level of knowledge in, and they start sharing their knowledge with other students. Or it's also experts from corporates, like people who have like a certain passion and know a lot about a certain field. So for example, we are working together with IFGame SH, who helps students to learn about how can I create games, e-games actually. And this is a kind of different setup, but what we're trying to do is to find new approaches for knowledge transfer. And the third part actually is that we offer also projects for students which supply the other contents which I just introduced, so that students are able to do some practical oriented stuff. So this is kind of the overview of the basics we had in 2013 roughly. Our experiences. What was interesting, like in the beginning, a lot of people didn't believe that corporates and employees are willing to share their knowledge. But what we found that there was only one time when someone said, I don't have the time. Actually, people want to share their knowledge. There was really one basic outcome that we can ask, like people from sales, from project management, technical people, that they all want to share their knowledge. They want to get in touch with young people, and they have fun doing it. And another thing was, of course, like a physical space for us was great. So we had our own physical space where people can meet. And it's interesting that because we do our courses in a co-working environment where also startups work, and this also helps a lot because we have a different learning environment than to what you're used to actually in university. Also the networking aspect, that we try to link corporates and students during our courses, is an important thing. We know that a lot of students found their jobs with our courses, sometimes by accident, like by a bike tour, and found an internship and now started working there. So also, it's not only about learning, it's also about like get to know possibilities. And of course, like that we have learning groups, like people who share some kind of interest, that they can meet each other and learn together. And there was one aspect where I have that it's also interesting that employees started to attend our courses. Not only that they want to share their knowledge, but they also find courses interesting for them, so they started to attend our courses. Where we are today, what we want to do is to link some student training with enterprise education, so that we can emphasize this aspect of networking a little bit more, and that students have more possibilities in finding like perspectives for their life. And what we want to do is like find the best online courses, find the best local experts, and create local learning groups so that people can learn the best way possible and find the best opportunities for them on a career basis. And we started like 2 years ago with a coding program, which has like, was not only like a course for like what we did so far, like for a specific or for a shorter time, but was more intensive. So the ambition is, you don't know anything about coding, you have 6 months time, so get to know in 6 months enough to start working as a coder in a company. And this was actually the first time we started working with online offers, because we were not able like to create all the learning approaches like on our own, or the teaching material, etc., on our own, and there was so much good material online actually, and so our total approach actually changed, that we nowadays we do less projects. We try to combine online courses with our like local physical approach. And we started in 2018, 2019 with Udacity because we assumed that it's quite easy for us if we take Udacity. They have the fixed learning path for us, and it's expensive, but the quality is high. But that in the end we found out that there's also some challenges in it, and now we switch to Udemy and we create our own learning paths. So Eric, who's doing the program, he is really smart in IT, and he's creating like with teaching material from Udemy. He's creating like the learning path what he thinks is best for the education of students for the local economy. So our challenge actually were like, do the courses really fit to our needs and to the needs of the corporates we are working together? Sometimes we need content from different platforms, and that was also challenging in order to set up the communication with the students. We had big struggles, and that starting times of courses changed. So we announced them, and then starting times of courses changed, and even harder was that also the prices for the courses changed. So our initial budget was fixed with the prices we knew, and then suddenly, like 2 weeks before we wanted to start, the prices changed from the course, and that was quite tough. And also sometimes the courses got updates, and we weren't informed, so we weren't prepared for that. And sometimes we didn't have the possibility that we had limited data to what our students actually doing, so we had to bypass it a little bit with screenshots to get to know where they are actually in the course. Could be a part like we're a small partner actually, but it was we're struggling a little bit with that. And it's also, of course, for us, it's time consuming to find the best courses. For future, what we think is like if we look to the corporate perspective, it's great when more companies start not only like offering learning possibilities, but also teaching possibilities. So it's important for schools, and it's important for universities. And this is something which I think has an influence on the whole learning culture we see nowadays in companies. And we really want to emphasize that this approach of also getting teaching involved is really important. I know nowadays it's even tough to find time for learning, but I think we need a different approach in the companies. And what's also interesting that for us also during this current times, that the approach of blended learning and simple online course is also interesting, where we find like the sweet spot for us. So in future, we see it that from the experience right now, because this time was the first time we did all courses online, and we added like courses from Coursera for the students, that we had also like students from Hamburg, from Flensburg, from local islands, wherever, who attended our courses, and that's really interesting to see. And what in future we want to do, we want to really like try to focus on doing online and offline, and try to bridge them and have good blended learning experiences for our attendees. And then I have some questions which could be interesting, like for us to discuss later on. And I don't know, perhaps Anthony and Heba, perhaps it's perhaps something for you. You could like, it's something we can discuss afterwards. But questions like which come up for us is like, how do I find time for my training? It's also for our organization itself. It's not easy. I mean, we try to motivate people to learn, but it's tough for ourselves to find the time to learn. So this is a big challenge. And how do we know what to learn? It's also not easy, and we're often asked that. Where do I find the best courses for me? Where do I find my study group? Should I use different platforms and media? If there are good YouTube videos, can I integrate them? And especially the topic, where do I find the best courses for me? I think, Heba, that could be a good handover to you. You have a lot of experience in that field. You worked at Kiron before, and you're now at Class Central. And it would be great to get some insights on your feeling about the whole topic and your experiences and what your conclusions are. So I would now hand over to Heba, and looking forward to hear more from Berlin. Hello, Berlin, as we say at the Eurovision Song Contest.
Hello, Kiel. Yeah, thank you very much. I will share my screen now.
Ich höre nichts. Ja.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Great.
Yes. Sure. Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm hearing myself twice, but I think I'll yeah, I wrote down your questions and I will try to discuss them also during my presentation. So today I will speak very generally about maybe introduce the concept of MOOC and about the evolution and introduce some trends, but actually focus on 3 statements. They are personal statements, maybe not personal, but like they are the statements I would or I have come up with during my experience working in the public sector in the Ministry of Education or later in the non-profit sector, helping students get to formal education through informal or non-formal education in the form of MOOCs, and then now working for Class Central as a search engine, kind of mega or pan platform, including every kind of resources known as MOOC and other offered by other providers. So yeah, these are the 3 things I will talk about. And now maybe just like an introduction about MOOCs, because I think it's also something that is not very much yeah, known in Germany, unfortunately, that course format, like massive open online courses. They're designed for online audience. They are taught primarily through short pre-recorded videos. They are flexible. The student or the learner can decide when to take the next lesson, and they include some interesting aspects for interaction, like discussion, forums, homework assignments, online quizzes that are shorter and more often, and then of course e-assessment. Well, the first MOOC was actually yeah, was kind of created 2008 in Canada, but where really things got really interesting globally was 2011. I think Anthony might speak about it, because Stanford professors who later founded Coursera were the ones who, in the field of artificial intelligence, put their material online and just asked students to join without any admission or registration. How do you say that? Steps and millions of. And it was a really interesting movement in like 2 or 3 courses started out in 2011. And then you can see already in this chart, 2012, more like hundreds of courses were produced. And then you have that constant increase until 2019, where we register like around 11,000 courses, and I'm sure this year we will have another growth. Interestingly, Class Central was also founded in 2011, in the end of 2011 in November, and it was actually Daval Shah, the founder of Class Central. He just put those links to the courses on a website, called it Class Central, and it became now the search engine, gathering all resources and being built as an ecosystem, a learning ecosystem for users. But in the beginnings, it was a listing for those kind of courses, laterly known as MOOCs. We have like around 35 million visitors at the moment from whom we have 2 million registered users. And we write about MOOCs, we follow up on developments. So you have the MOOC report, which is like where we think and about MOOCs and write about the recent developments in the industry. And then you have the course catalog, where we have the syllabus and everything. I will show you in a second how this looks like. It is important to say that we have more than 110 million students worldwide using MOOCs as a learning resource. This is Class Central. It's a simple search engine. You can search by subject. You have it's built for simple for simple orientation, and we are building it now to be more like a learning ecosystem for online learners. This is how a course page looks like. You have the syllabus, you have information about the course. Here is a course offered by the University of California on Coursera, and then when you click on go to class, you're forwarded to Coursera. This is also one part how Class Central is making money. It's an affiliate marketing business, and you can see already all-time top 10 in orange. This is the mark that a course, like a label that the course gets when the course makes it to one of the rankings, because we also use the learners' data to create rankings. We have like 3 to 4 kind of rankings. One is all time. This is like based on the reviews, and then we have the best of the year. These are only the courses created or produced in the year of 2019, for example. Or we have the most popular. These are the courses that are marked as favorite for a specific month, and these are courses that are not weren't started yet. So you can mark courses, bookmark them before on our platform, and then they will be marketed as the most popular, giving an orientation to what is actually coming up in the following month. Now, something very interesting happened when everybody was sitting at home practicing lockdown, because we registered a very high traffic on the 16th of March. And it was actually very interesting because it wasn't that we just published a new article or people went on Class Central on the site. No, actually a list of Ivy League courses from January was shared in a Facebook group. And then we had really crazy hours, like Daval tweets in March 18th, because we had over 1 million users using Class Central to find their courses only in these 2 days. And in these 2 days we had, or 1 day actually, we had more traffic than in the whole month of February, which was really interesting. And then if you look at the numbers compared like March 15th to April 15th with the whole year of 2019, you will see that actually our numbers in these 30 days exceeded our numbers in 2019. So it was a huge growth in a very short time. At the same time, if you have a look at the platforms and how they were doing in that time, you will see that they also had the same increase. So Coursera's Alexa ranking, for example, jumped to 287, or Class Central did also had a good increase, but also the number of sessions in March was very high. And apart from Swayam, actually, this is the Indian MOOC platform, everyone had a very significant increase. One of the reasons why this happened, or maybe a factor that encouraged the constant increase for this period, was actually that MOOC platforms were eager to offer courses for free and certificates for free for a specific time. Coursera, for example, extended this period until the end of July. And not only MOOC platforms, of course, but MOOC platforms had a very quick reaction. Especially Coursera was one of the very first platforms to react to the situation in the beginning of March. So I'll come now to my 3 statements because I've been speaking about online education for some years now. There are some stigma around it, especially in Germany, where digitization is still like a big question mark, sadly. One of the things that is, or one of the fears, is that MOOC-based education is something that is replacing higher education or the formal sector. So I can assure, or I believe that MOOCs and MOOC-based education is not actually, or shouldn't be considered as an alternative to formal higher education or a replacement. It is actually an independent learning form. I'm saying that because it has, there are a lot of trials to compare the learning experience in MOOCs to the higher education experience. One of the examples is that we apply the same categories when comparing, or with on-campus education, for example, we take the same metrics to measure success. One of the big question marks, and I'm sure Anthony can speak about that too, is completion rate. So everyone who would criticize online education would say, yeah, but nobody finishes the course. But maybe it is not actually about finishing a course, right? Maybe it is about learning something you wanted to learn, and then you stop when you're done. Maybe the certificate is not as essential because most of the learners have already a degree. So we see a lot of, also on our platform, lots of people start a course, they review it, they are in the middle of the course, but they say, I'm done because I've got what I needed. And I think we need to kind of reflect about that in order to not to see MOOCs as kind of in competition to formal education. The second, and this is actually very interesting, has been speaking about the crisis in higher education for like 10, maybe 20 years, but very especially 2011 and 12, when MOOC started, everybody was afraid the university or colleges won't have any future anymore. And you can see that, of course, the higher education sector survived, but we need to have we need to create some new categories in order to use and make benefits out of the different education forms we have. So the second statement is maybe a bit revolutionary, I don't know, but I was thinking one of the claims that the stigma you also get is, or one of the questions where people are curious is, when you present anything about MOOCs, they start asking, so is it recognized? Are we going to get any credits for the course? Is the certificate recognized when I want to continue with a degree? or which institution will allow me to enter, I don't know, later, or to get the course recognized. One of the really interesting things people always, or I see missing in our whole discussion about education, is that our learning experience as a whole, maybe actually all learning experience in a very general sense, is informal. Like, we have very, very limited chances in our lives where education gets formal, where education is part of an education system, where syllabus is actually defining where the next step is going to be. The very interesting, not interesting, but the only skill that we really master in our lives is the communication skill, a language, a verbal language, or a sign language. And this is the first thing we learn, and a child learns a language informally, right? Because informal in this sense is that you learn something without the purpose of learning. So MOOCs fall into non-formal because you actually intend to have the purpose of learning, and it's an organizational framework, but it's not formal because it's part of an educational system, although they are created by or produced by universities. But at the same time, also Steffen Brandt was speaking about that yesterday, that actually when you think about companies and which skills you need, you always turn to universities who maybe don't really have the staff to teach artificial intelligence, for example. So actually the first thing to do, if you're curious about it, just start a course and learn the ABC of artificial intelligence and then go from there. But we have a fear or something, and we think informal and non-formal education is not good enough, because I mean, in the German context, it is also something about certificates and degrees, and they are very important in the CV. But I think we need to shift our thinking here and go back to where is actually our goal and where to use materials and resources to achieve it. So yeah, these are the different kind of certificates or trends that were in the part of the MOOC evolution. And if you go a bit further and you have a look at how MOOCs kind of changed the markets of learning, you will see that they opened in 2011 new markets, but kind of in slowly, but actually very constantly they are going, MOOC platforms are going back to formal education, to online degrees. They are going back to professional development, like corporate training. And they are, with this, slowly leaving those new markets, the free, open, and going back. So if you have a look at the evolution of MOOCs, if you want to call it that way, you will see that these big courses in 2011 attracted millions of learners. Then there were the certificates for money. You paid $50 to get a certificate for a course, but the content was free. Then you had the micro credential where you can bundle some of the different courses. Then you had the college credit, where things moved into the formal sector, the formal educational sector. And then you had the online degree. I don't want to say copying, but actually trying to make sense out of the online courses into a formal format. And then we are now in the corporate training or corporate learning sector, where it is also growing very constantly. But I'm really wondering where or how we will deal with these two new markets, and if the MOOC platforms will will make sure that those new markets are also part of their business. Maybe we can discuss this also later. So if you have a look at the online degree, the Master of Business Administration enrollments of the University of Illinois, for example, you will see that the same courses had over 1 million of enrollments when the course was for free. Then you had the certificates with 50,000 participants with a specific amount of money, and then you had the college credit. This means that you can get college credit, and then you can have the chance to recognize it later if you want to continue. And then you had the degree with less enrollments, higher price, kind of like a different product for every pocket, something like that. But I'm really wondering if we are serving with this development or targeting with this development again the elitist like a group of learners who are already participating in the formal educational system with this development, because I think I think it would be more likely that within the 1 million of participants in a free course, there will be more people who couldn't have afforded the online degree. So speaking about these new, these old markets, you will see that the certificate program was clearly directing or targeting professional learners. Here, an example from edX. Another example from FutureLearn is the online degrees. They are having a lot of degrees also targeting professionals who want to study their masters. Most of these masters are also part-time, so that you can work and study. And the third one, and I'm sure Anthony will speak about it, is the corporate training, where you can see that the biggest MOOC platforms, Coursera for Business here and edX for Business, are also having the same offers, or kind of bundling their courses to be part of that industry for corporate training. Class Central is interesting because we have all different learners on a platform where you can choose, or you can have this search experience. I would say you can kind of try to browse and see which course is reviewed how. And because it's not only focused on one platform, it gives you a bigger, maybe a good overview, a bigger choice if you want. And we had a chance to do that very exhausting survey in 2017, and actually I found something really interesting, and I will close with it. It was about the question: have you received any benefits from taking MOOCs? And half of them said not really, and then you have them saying higher performance at the current job, while the rest is helped me get a new job in the same field, helped me get a new job in a different field at the same level, and then you have school credit towards the degree or promotion at the current organization. And I think if corporates would be seeing their employees as the biggest actually resource, which is the case nowadays. If you think that investing in the abilities and skills of your employees is actually the thing that will continue or will bring your corporate forward. I think this is actually a very positive result, seeing that taking a MOOC have had a good influence about for performance at the current job, and then the promotion at the current organization. I think I would say thank you for now, and yeah, I would love to discuss everything, of course, later with you too.
Yeah, first.
Okay.
And now Anthony, I think.
Thank you, Heba. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, I'll keep.
The connection is
You can
not
hear me.
so.
Great, fantastic.
I can't hear him now.
You can't hear me at all?
Yeah, now it's working.
Okay.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Heba, for that introduction to MOOCs. That was a great overview. In fact, I can recall a few months back, Class Central actually put together sort of a history of Coursera, which we actually shared around our internal organization, because it was a very good view for our new starters of how the company had evolved. So I always find it interesting reading. I'm going to talk a little bit about the insights that we have from Coursera, particularly the changes that we've seen in response to the COVID crisis. And Coursera really has sort of four fundamental areas of focus. We look at what we would call the general individual consumer marketplace, and we have about 60 million people on our platform today. Many of those, the vast majority, are accessing learning for free on the Coursera platform. We also have a big focus on government. So we work with governments typically to do things such as building citizen development programs around digital literacy. More recently, we made Coursera freely available through government entities to anyone that's been made unemployed by COVID, effectively giving them access to Coursera for free until the end of the year so they can focus on reskilling for potentially new roles. We also work very closely with campuses, with universities, higher educational organizations, with a Coursera for Campus focus. I'll talk a little bit more detail about that program in a second. And then we also work, of course, with corporate organizations. As Heba said, there's been a huge increase in the level, I guess, of interest in online learning as a result of COVID. And there's some very direct correlations with the lockdown in different countries, but also seeing that driving some behavioral changes in terms of what actually people are looking to learn as well on the platforms. From our perspective, we provide content across the business, data, and technical skills. So we have a fairly holistic offering in terms of the different types of courses that you can do. And we have seen traditionally that the big power usages around Coursera tends to be in things such as coding, machine learning, AI, technology, data literacy, and so on, and then sort of general business management skills. In the recent couple of months, we've seen some very big increases in online learning. So just looking at the last 30 days, we've had a 477% increase in enrollments compared to the same period last year. And if you look at it in sort of months, in April alone, we had nearly 10 million enrollments, over a 600% increase, again, from the same period last year. So there's been some big jumps in terms of the amount of learning that's been done. And a lot of this is coming from people who are sort of stuck in lockdown, maybe not able to be as productive as they once were before, and using online learning as something to engage with during that time. We've also seen there's some really popular courses emerging that perhaps wouldn't have been as popular pre-COVID. So there was a recently launched contact tracing course from Johns Hopkins University, which has been one of our most popular courses launched this year so far. Many countries are looking to build contact tracing programs. There's a course around Science Matters, which is all about the virus and how it gets transmitted, and some very strong information that really gets into the kind of the science behind it. And then there's things such as crash courses in Python, and there are programs around intros to AI, which are always popular as people looking potentially to reskill into technical areas, especially where their jobs might have been under threat. And there's a lot of content around kind of public health, well-being, mental health awareness information, as people are struggling to adapt with being in lockdown and isolation and not having a normal world. So we're seeing some interesting shifts in dynamics. When we started to go into the crisis, we work obviously very closely with educational organizations. The vast majority of our content comes from university partners that create content and host it on the Coursera platform. And so we wanted to very quickly try and do something to help universities during the crisis. And so we made available Coursera to any educational institution for free until the end of July. Any student could complete a course until the end of September. And we had a huge response to that program. And I think that said a couple of things. First of all, it said that for the most part, most universities weren't ready for this, certainly weren't ready to kind of suddenly switch from on-campus to online. And there wasn't an obvious and easy fix for doing that. And Coursera has helped to some degree bridge that gap. And what we've seen is something like about 5,000 institutions have joined that program over the last couple of months to set up a Coursera for Campus solution, providing online content to their students who could no longer access the campuses. And we've already had more than 1 million students take courses on the platform, and millions and millions of learning hours have already been conducted. So it's been a very significant response. We fundamentally believe that education has been effectively forced into an inflection point, a sort of period of forced experimentation, if you will. And most organizations going forward will have to have some form of blended learning, hybrid learning going forward. It won't be purely on campus. It won't equally be completely off campus either. There will be definitely a model, and it's about bringing those two things together. But I think what we are now seeing is that there's going to be a bit more of a shakeup. And it's not as simple in terms of offering an online program to simply say, let's just record what we did on campus and put it out there online. It's a little bit like saying, well, you know, we used to have this play in the theater, let's record the play on camera and we'll call it a movie. It's a totally different experience, and it's a totally different learning paradigm, and you have to design it for such. And so organizations are now grappling with how do they actually build a program that will actually engage students, where people won't complain about the quality or the experience or request fee reductions, but will actually engage with it in a positive way. And accepting that their student populations will have much more challenging needs. Some will not be able to travel. How do you connect with international students, with students who perhaps now have to work part-time or flexible, or have lost their funding and have to engage with you in a different way? And I think that's going to have a knock-on effect to how organizations are considered, how they're ranked globally in the big ranking agencies. And what universities are now looking at, or higher educational institutions, are very much focused on how do we attract students? How do we improve our global rankings given these changes that are going on right now? And how do you drive higher employability outcomes for our students, particularly given that there's a global economic recession coming? And also, if students are going to be accessing their learning from home, it actually opens a much greater global competition. You could work in Siberia or Nigeria or Australia, and it doesn't matter, because you're not now going somewhere for the location of the campus experience. You're going for the educational option that you believe will give you the best outcomes. And so it creates a very different dynamic in the marketplace. It's going to be very interesting to see how that materializes over the next year or so. Similarly, I think on the corporate side of business, we've seen a very different type of approach depending on the industry sector that you're in. So some organizations, particularly in things like the hospitality sector, in retail, in the services space, of course, are in survival mode. And they're not investing in learning, they're just purely trying to survive the crisis and come out of the side, because pretty much everything is stopped. Their staff are on furloughed or not able to work. But there are other organizations that are able to survive, and there are organizations that, of course, can actually thrive within this environment because their service is high in demand. A lot of technology companies, pharmaceutical companies, food retailers, etc. And many of these organizations have invested very heavily in learning solutions during this crisis, or online learning solutions in particular. And there's a few reasons which has been driving that. Firstly, of course, everybody's had to shift to a remote working culture. And that's meant in most cases, access to face-to-face training programs and instructor-led training has no longer been available, and something has had to be substituted for that. And so in many cases, there's been a very rapid adoption to replace those programs through an online mechanism. The second thing is that many organizations have seen learning as a way to connect and reach out and wrap your arms around employees, particularly those who can't do their full role at home or are less productive, or whose jobs might actually be under threat when we come back because they're at risk of automation. Companies are investing in learning to say, if you can't be fully productive, this is what you want me to be productive around developing new skills that will be of value to the company and value to yourself. Learning in itself also gives people hope. It gives you people something to focus on. It gives you a positive outcome. It gives you a feeling you're progressing yourself and your career options and giving yourself future alternatives. And so we've seen a big self-driven desire for people to learn, correlated very strongly with lockdown, but also a big push from many companies to encourage that. And so we've seen a very, very significant uptake in many corporate spheres on the utilization of online learning. The final piece of that is, of course, most companies believe you can't simply stop doing skills development. And if anything, the requirement for developing skills is increasing in speed. As technology consistently brings new capabilities, new forms of automation, skill sets around AI, machine learning, digital literacy, etc., are rapidly changing. Those skills last typically 2 to 4 years, and then they're outdated and you have to do reskill. So people in technical roles are used to reskilling quite frequently, but even business and leadership skills are now evolving very much faster. The ability now to run virtual teams, to run remote teams, to run digital teams, cross-functional teams, bringing emotional insights and intelligence into process, how you handle very diverse groups of people. All of these kind of skill sets are becoming much more prevalent and relevant as we change the way we embrace technology and we transform businesses. And so even in the softer skills, we're seeing a greater need for change and a greater requirement to update and keep those skills proficient. And so that's driven a big, big shift in learning. Now, I think some of the questions that had been kind of raised up front was things like when do I find time to study? What should I study? How do I study, etc. One of the things that I think is we're starting to see more recognition of is this concept that lifelong learning isn't just something we pay lip service to. I think gone are the days we had jobs for life. Gone are the days you came out of university and you could work for 30 or 40 years and retire. First of all, our working time is much longer. Second of all, we're going to see a much longer career period, but with much more frequency of job changes within that as things obviously accelerate in pace. And most of us will probably have to reinvent our careers 2, 3, or 4 times during their working period. And I think there's a really strong opportunity for governments and for educational institutions and companies to come together and facilitate lifelong learning as we go forward. From Coursera's perspective, we have a unique opportunity that we work with both educational outlets and we work with businesses. And we know the skills that businesses are trying to develop. We have 60 million users on our platform. We have a huge level of data that tells us what are the skills people are trying to develop, what are the roles they sit in today. And because of all our courses have a lot of assessments built in, we also have a view into what level of capability. Are they beginners? Are they intermediates? Are they masters in these skills and domains? And so we can see what companies by geography, by sector, by industry are looking for in skills. And that same content can be brought into degree programs to ensure that students are emerging job ready with the skills that are actually in demand today, as well as the more sort of pedagogical and traditional skills that are taught within a typical educational setting. But I think education, the universities, the higher educational institutions, the specialists also have a part to play in helping organizations and individuals reskill throughout the longevity of their career. And we're seeing more opportunities for businesses to partner together in things like executive education programs, internal programs, companies sponsoring degrees for employees who may be in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s, or perhaps reinventing themselves, or didn't have the opportunity to go to university in the first place because they never had access to the opportunity of the funds. And we're seeing partnerships such as Google creating content which has certifications, has real meaning in the world. I think we'll see educational programs that won't just have a university stamp on them, but they may have a business stamp on them, or a partnership between major corporate organizations and universities. So I think there's going to be a big shakeup in the landscape of opportunities to learn and to engage. And to a lot of Heba's points earlier on, these are just different modalities of learning. And I think there's a lot of intersection points and there's a lot of different approaches to it. But the idea that a degree is the sole and gold standard of what good learning and what a certification it looks like is, it's not necessarily disappearing, but it's one of the options. And that degree program, in many cases, may no longer be relevant in 10 years. It's certainly not going to be relevant for your lifetime. And there are many jobs today that most of us on this meeting didn't exist when we were studying. And there'll be jobs that will be existing today that are not being taught. So that change and pace is going to drive some really strong behavioral changes in the marketplace. I think one of the key things that we're talking about when we sort of say is, when do people find time to learn as our lives get ever busier and our workday gets more challenging, is that learning needs to be seen by organizations as part of the working day. And it has to be built into the culture of work. It can't simply be it's something you do in your own time outside of your working hours. Novartis, for example, who's one of our big global clients, has a very aggressive goal around learning, where they want to have 100 learning hours per person per year. So about 5% of your working time should be dedicated to learning. They've got a hugely strong learning culture. And that's within the flow of work as part of the work focus. And they try and very much encourage people to do that. And it's also encouraging leadership and managers to do that. So that if a manager was to walk past the desk of an employee and say, hey, what are you up to right now? Oh, I'm learning a course. The answer shouldn't be, why are you doing that? Why are you not doing your day job or your work? It should be fantastic. You're developing your skills in an area that's important to us as a business. The part then about what should you learn, I think why do people learn in the first place? There's two fundamental reasons. One is they must have the capability to do so. They must have access to materials. They must have the technical interaction points. They must have some sort of form of capability to actually access learning. But the second is they've got to want to do it. There's got to be something in it for them, some prize to encourage them to do so. And I think where a company can very strongly connect, if you are learning in these domains, this is why it matters to us as an organization. These are the business outcomes that we're hoping to achieve. These are the roles we expect to develop and grow in the future. It brings meaning to the learning endeavor. And from an individual employee perspective, then the meaning is about career mobility, about the chance to do projects you could have never done before. Maybe it's about salary increases. Maybe it's about career reinvention, about doing something that excites you or gives you passion in a role in the company that allows you to stay there when perhaps your role has been automated out. But these are pretty significant prizes for individuals, and it's about bringing those to light. And then I think it's about guidance. All of our evidence shows that if you give someone a catalog of 1,000 courses, they'll probably do nothing, because it's just choice overload and you don't know where to start. But if you sort of say, for your role and for your aspirations, for what you're looking to achieve, here are 3 or 4 recommendations. They'll start with the top one and they'll do the next 2 or 3, because it's guidance and it's helped siphon through all that noise to come up with an actual program that will help them move forward. And I think there's a really big opportunity for organizations to help with that guidance and connecting with the value for the employees to drive that meaning forward and engage. Most of the MOOC courses are done in very bite-sized chunks. And an average Coursera course is probably 15 hours of learning content. Some are 4 or 5, some are 30 or more. And people often say to me, how do you get time to do a 30-hour course? And I say, well, I don't have time to do 30 hours. I've definitely got time to do 5 minutes. And there are 5-minute videos, and there's 5-minute readings, and 5 minutes a day, and 5 minutes tomorrow. And before you know it, a month has gone by and I've completed the course. And so it's about fitting it in bite-sized chunks around what you're doing. And actually learning in very small chunks is actually a far more effective way than trying to learn in an 8-hour or 12-hour window, because you can't retain it. And so it's about building learning as part of what you do in daily life, little bits here and there, traveling on a plane, in a car, on a train, during work at certain times, scheduling time, building time into your diary to make that learning happen. And it's an investment in your skill set that will pay you significant dividends into the future. I'm going to stop there because I could probably talk for a very long time and hopefully open it up to questions, and back to my fellow panelists.
Thank you very much, Anthony. And yeah, it was really interesting to see also this different perspectives. Also, of course, like a little bit see organizational background. I think these topics of what we have to pay like for learning is interesting, like especially for like the people where the corporates don't take so much responsibility, and you have to kind of to pay for your own. And also we had like this Coursera boost. Actually, I don't know if you would use Coursera right now without having the possibility to get like some financial benefits during the time. And what's also like when we work with students together, of course, it's a challenge. Like if we would take money, it was a lot of people like said, why don't you take money from the students for what are you offering? But for us, felt always it was important to be open and not to say you have to have and I don't know, you don't have to have an universal degree or whatever, university degree or whatever. It's just important that you want to learn. So I think this is one totally interesting on the worldwide level. We will see what's happening in like countries, Stefan, you know, like it's in Chile, what's happening there, or what we see in the US, especially also nowadays. And on the other level, we have the corporates and the enterprises who actually spend a lot of money in this segment. But I don't know, like from the feeling, what I see here in the region, not so much money on online content. It's more like local companies or like German companies who are offering education programs for a lot of money, and that there seems to be like a lot of possibilities for savings. But do you think they are willing to save the money, or it's like and just take the company where they work together like for several years and take the same course, like, and they paid 5,000 euros? Or do you think they do you have numbers, or that companies, for example, here in Germany shift and say, okay, we try to use online offers in order to save money and improve learning on actually both, hopefully?
Yeah, I mean, I think Germany has been a much slower market compared to, I think, the rest of Europe in adoption of online learning. And there's been, I think, a number of reasons for that. I think there's a kind of a cultural challenge in just in being very sure that something will work and looking for a lot of consensus around that. There's the job security of the marketplace. There's a perceived likely reaction of what that might be. There's a requirement always to get all the worker council support behind these programs, and that in itself can be a challenge because there have been concerns sometimes from worker councils that actually learning data could be used negatively in performance reviews against individuals and could be used in a kind of punitive way. So there's a lot of kind of questions and challenges that have been addressed as part of that process. But I do think we're actually getting past most of those big questions. And this year in particular, we've seen some very significant growth in our business, certainly within the region, with some very, very large organizations starting their journey on online learning, and with some quite significant growth and adoptions in those utilizations. So I think that market is now starting to open up. I think there's been more recognition that it actually can work and can be effective in the German marketplace. There's been an acceleration of that, I think, again, because of COVID to some degree. It's kind of created opportunity to test and try these things. And in many cases, there's been a perception that the experience will be terrible, and it's found out to be not as bad as they thought. It clearly is a much cheaper option than going to be instructor-led or face-to-face, but it doesn't mean it will replace it in all scenarios. Face-to-face has great utilization for certain types of learning. And the second thing I would say also is that most organizations would say that learning really only happens when you're actually applying that learning to a real world scenario. So you can watch videos and you can fill in forms and do assessments, but until you're actually using that learning in a real world context, you're not actually developing the skill. You've just shown that you've absorbed some material. And part of Coursera's solution is that we also now have a lot of what we call guided projects, where we help organizations using their technology and their configurations of those technologies. We can build very specific projects around it using their subject matter experts, where effectively employees can go in and apply their knowledge in a very safe environment through a virtual machine on their own technology to test those skills in an applied environment. And that has a much more powerful impact because now you're actually driving adoption of technology. You're helping all the employees within your technology leverage those huge IT investments. And it's about driving much better business outcomes. So I think if you can show that actually you can have a demonstrable impact in business outcomes, you can do so in a more cost-effective and a more efficient way. There's a level of you can't ignore the business case of that, especially if on the global competitive stage, other organizations are doing it and realizing those savings and those utility gains. And so I think it's shifting. I think also think it's a fairly slow market to adapt, but I definitely think it's heading in that direction.
And how do you see, like, perhaps it's perhaps also for you, Heba, like the sometimes a little bit like the contradiction. I told you before, we worked, for example, with Udacity, and sometimes kind of we switch between different platforms. Of course, sometimes you find good YouTube movies or whatever. And yeah, how do you, I mean, and that's tough sometimes to handle, because like if I imagine like we would focus only, for example, on Coursera, because we have, for example, for us then a good back end, we get some overview, but then we find a course which is kind of feels way better, and then it's tricky and to bring them somehow together. I think, Heba, you're working, like, you're focusing on free courses, but also the challenge, like for an organizational view, that you have also a lot of different platforms to work with then. Do you believe in standards in that field? Like there's something new coming, something big, which is kind of the big new meta platform? And
well, I think Coursera is actually a really good example for standards, because you have more or less a really high quality experience throughout all courses. You don't get surprised by archived courses, because there are different deals than on other platforms, where courses are, or the deals with the instructors can lead to an archived course very suddenly, where people are still in the course, or I don't know what. So I think Coursera is actually doing well when it comes to offering how do you say that, a constant experience environment for the learning experience. What we found out is actually people write reviews on the course page on Class Central for a course they had on Coursera or edX or FutureLearn, and then some of them, they would link a YouTube video saying, and by the way, this is also something I can only recommend, and this is how we came up with the idea to actually let the students or the learners create their own lists of learning paths. And these lists are not only consisting of the courses that are listed on Class Central, but they can actually link any resources and create their own curriculum if you want to have it that way. So Open Campus or students from Open Campus can actually create their own syllabus, not syllabus, but their own curriculum, where they recommend, or they can see, they can kind of build their own way throughout, like a skill development they wanted. I think what I'm really not afraid of, but I think this massive format is kind of shrinking by the time. I think having assessment behind paywalls is also giving on some platforms is giving the learner a very limited experience during the course, because of course you can read something, but you can't really through a quiz see if you have learned it. Like, you can't have that confirmation, and this is not a really nice development. But then back to Anthony, maybe, because he said the majority of learners are taking the courses for free or auditing the courses. Actually, on Coursera also, you can have the course for free without a certificate, and it's very clearly stated. You don't have to click through hundreds of hidden links. Which percentage would you think like the free participant would make out of the whole Coursera enrollments?
I would say that about 90% of the people on our platform access the content for free. So it's a very significant percentage. I mean, it's 50 million plus individuals are going to access content without having to pay for it, and it's very much is part of our mission to kind of democratize that educational access for all. You really just need a way to access the internet, and you're going to access content from Yale and Imperial and some of these amazing university brands around the world. And we have seen some incredible learner stories of people who come from war-torn countries, have access to no education whatsoever, who've taken courses and now go and work for Google or whatever and have transformed their lives totally. And it's exciting to be able to offer that out. A lot of the ability to do that, of course, comes from the ability to have some individuals who will want to pay because they want to have the certificates, they want to be able to publish them on their LinkedIn profiles, they want to be able to demonstrate them to work. And the investments that governments and universities and corporates make in the platform, because the content is expensive to make. Some of these courses can be over $100,000 of investment. Some of the specializations where you've got 4 or 5 courses on a constant theme can be as much as $1 million of investment. And of course, those individuals have to monetize that investment. They have to get a return on that course. And so when you have a quality bar, you have to have obviously some mechanism to ultimately fund the provision of that quality. The goal of Coursera is to have those that can pay and will see the commercial benefits of doing so be the primary funding sources, while still trying to make it as accessible to anybody in the world who doesn't have the capability to pay to still access world-class learning. And that's very core to our vision as we go to the market.
I think it would be totally interesting to talk about a little bit more about the whole topic of like funding free learning online and the concept. Perhaps next week we have a talk about like which is more focusing on the university side. Perhaps to sum up what we discussed tonight. I talked like last year a lot to the city of Kiel government here, and they also have a challenge in like educating their employees and especially focusing on like the whole topic of digitalization and also having some people like being afraid on losing their jobs and how to handle it. Like, what would you suggest? You had kind of this kind of, if I can say, best practices on like 100 hours per year to educate yourself or let your employees educate themselves. But do you know any kind of best practices, like how to follow, like for a city, like is it like what's the best way to be prepared, for example, for digitalization? I mean, I know it's if you search actually for courses like on digitalization, for example, it's not easy to find the right courses actually because it's kind of such a fuzzy word. And but
yes,
what do you have any clues like for companies or governments who say, okay, we need to do something? What steps should they take?
Well, we do a lot of work with government organizations, kind of both country and state and local level and cities and so on. And certainly pre-COVID, and some of the rationales changed a little bit now, but pre-COVID, the general concern from many governments was that many citizens would have their jobs automated out of existence. And if they didn't have an ability to reskill those citizens ahead of that time, there'd be a massive unemployment issue, which would be hugely costly to the economy and the government's ability to provide benefits and support. And it's a far more effective way to get ahead of that problem by ensuring that the skills exist at the citizen level so that they can adapt and take on the new roles as the more manual laborers, more of the easily automated jobs start to disappear. And so a lot of those programs were around building digital literacy level skills. And we did a survey last year that talked about what is the level of digital skills kind of by country. There's some big variations around what those levels of skills are today. And there's still some huge gaps at a sort of general kind of population level. And so I think from a government perspective, it is about working with the industry experts, with the professionals that can sort of say, what are the future skills? And there's lots of work. There's organizations like the World Economic Forum and many others that will publish very straightforward guides on what are the future skills that are going to be required by industry over the next few years. And then it's once you've identified the skills, the core skills, is about then curating and building learning programs that will develop those skill sets. In most cases, they're foundational. They're fairly beginner level. Generally speaking, if someone is already at an intermediate level, they either know enough to drive their own learning, or they've already got a level of skill set that'll get them into work anyway. But it's actually bringing the foundational skills into place, the very basics about what is it, what is data, what is AI, what does it mean, what does digital transformation, what those words actually mean in a corporate context. So it's identifying the right level of content, not overwhelming amount of content, but picking some very carefully curated set of courses so that it's easy for an individual to be granted access to a program and go, okay, there's half a dozen things I need to learn. That's easy, I can focus on those. And there's perhaps 5 or 6 key tracks depending on the kind of interests of the individual that you can follow. So I think it's about keeping it very simple, foundational, focus on digital skills and around future skills that we believe, at least at this current point in time, based on all the data we have, will be most in demand in the future. And it's kind of crazy in a way that there are certain roles out there that every corporate is trying to hire for, like data scientists and data engineers and machine learning specialists and some of the coding skill sets. Companies cannot find enough people to do these roles because there just is not enough supply in the marketplace. And often those individuals, they'll go and get hired, and then 6 months later, they're poached by Google or Facebook with crazy kind of salaries because it's a real price war trying to secure those people. And yet, if companies invest, and that's what companies are investing in those reskilling initiatives, but also governments have an opportunity to invest in people who have been unemployed, whose roles are disappearing, to generate those skills. There's a very clear market demand for those. And it's a very cost-effective way to resolve unemployment issues, is to actually invest in reskilling people for roles that are highly in demand. And that's I think, where cities and things can really get very smart, because at a city level, you know the key industries within the catchment area of your people. You know the big hirers, the big employers. You can engage directly with them on the skills gaps that they have in their current organizations, and you can build programs to align those with the current workforce.
Perhaps it's like getting here some pressure from the team, just a slight pressure, because it's like I think they're working now since, like, I don't know, 12 hours, I guess, in background. I would perhaps like have one last question. I don't know if you have one last question. It's also fine. Like, how do you educate yourself at Class Central? Like, what's your approach at your organization? Like, do you have a general approach? Do you have something like you get 100 hours, like, for free learning, or how is it handled? Or is it just, can you just learn the whole year because it's Class Central and you have to try out all the courses?
That's a really nice question. Yeah, actually, we are paid to learn. That's really crazy. But I made it to that job. So so learning is part of working, as Anthony suggested. We're actually the example for it, and because we answer lots of questions about the courses. So we go into the course, we take the first, second, third week. Maybe I finish the course and then I give an answer to those questions. Actually, my one colleague, Pat, she already finished 107 MOOCs, and she compares MOOCs. For example, the Python course of the University of Michigan, it is available on 3 platforms, so Coursera, edX, and FutureLearn, and she would take all 3 courses and compare the platforms, how the platforms are actually applying the course. So I think Class Central, we have the luxury to do it, and I hope our corporates will actually see that employees are actually one of the biggest investing in. But maybe I'm really sorry for your colleagues, but there is one question I have in mind, because Anthony, you said that in Germany digitization is going very slow, but at the same time in the US, where digitization or education is very flexible, we have 30 million unemployed people in such a short time, and at the same time job security and workforce in Germany in a very traditional sense, and actually not applying lots of tools, not integrating online education and professional development, not being very flexible with educational path, learning path or something, is having this security and is being less hit by the crisis. And I think this is actually a really nice controversial, if you can see that, because it doesn't actually make sense, right?
Well, I think it's very interesting with Germany. I mean, Germany has, as you say, a very different challenge. So in Germany, there's very high employment rates. It's a very, it's a powerhouse country in Europe. But the one challenge that Germany has is where it needs new skills, there's no one on the marketplace. And it's very hard to hire anybody. So the only real option is to reskill people. And so that is actually driving a desire for digitalization in a very different way and a very different dynamic to the US marketplace. It's also a much more socially oriented country looking after people than perhaps we'd see in the US, which is a much more, I guess, capitalist kind of approach. And it's very much more of a hire and fire perhaps mentality than you might find in a German corporation, where longer tenures and much more protections are put in place for workers than you'd have in the US, which makes it a different regime in how you have to deal with employees and how you invest in their ongoing development.
Yep, thank you. We're being kicked out.
Yeah,
I'm sensing
I told him you should go now.
No pressure.
Yeah, thank you very much, you two. Really interesting to talk to you, and it would be even more interesting, I think, to see you really in physical here. Perhaps it's possible, like next year, to come and visit Kiel. For me, it was a quite interesting day because I never met two. I think Anthony, you're from Scotland, right? Or you only studied there?
England. Yes.
Ah, okay, yeah, okay.
I studied in Scotland.
At least I met like two people who were in Scotland today, and we have another one like from England.
I was born in Scotland, though.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Ah,
okay.
Now you know. Yeah, really.
Oh, that's why it's known. Yeah.
You can tell with that accent.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to see what's happening. What my takeaway for tonight is that we really have to work on our look at also some people here, that we spend more time on educating ourselves. It's actually the Waterkant Festival is always like one of the best parts in the year because we can listen to a lot of sessions and educate ourselves. But we have to do a little bit more on that also in our own organization, actually. Also on a strategic basis.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Thank you very much, Harm. Thank you. And thank you, Heba. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us tonight. It's really great to have some input from you. And I'll just say a few words now just to close us out. But yeah, thanks, guys. And yes, we'll hope to see you in Kiel next year.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much.